Thank you, Marie, for this kind introduction. Thank you, Bill, for hosting this webinar. Good morning, all. And my presentation will be a focus on the policy and the legislative aspects. What is currently in the legislation, what's upcoming, and what is also the needed action. As mentioned by Wilmer, we really definitely need some specific aspects regarding shopping centers or more large commercial buildings in this aspect. As you most probably all know, is that all building-related legislation on national or even on regional level across Europe is mostly an implementation of EU legislation, and therefore this legislative aspect from EU is quite important for this topic today. So it has been a long way from medieval markets, Middle Eastern bazaars, and 18th century arcades to modern shopping centers as we know today. And in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, really this aspect of shopping centers were established as the most dominant retail form, especially in Western Europe. And in the meanwhile, technologies developed and they are still currently developing, and policies should keep track on what is upcoming and what are the new and smart technologies available for these markets today. So in the current legislation, there is the most important European directive, which is the energy performance of buildings one. There is also quite a lot of other accompanying directives or European legislation, which is relevant. For example, Energy Efficiency Directive has an obligation for renovation strategies. But I think for new buildings, we should keep in mind that in the Energy Performance of Building Directive, there is the aspect of NZEB, nearly zero energy buildings, which have to be obliged as from 2021. Practically, that means that for a big project like new shopping centers that will be constructed from 2020, the project are already starting now. So basically, every new project for shopping centers should already be with an NZEB approach, as we say today. That is for the new buildings. It's not for the renovation. As most of you all know, is that currently there is a revision of all energy-related legislation. It's called the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. And, well, it's a very interesting reading list of around 1,000 pages, so I invite you to do so, or I will just scroll quickly through what is relevant for non-residential buildings in this Clean Energy package, which is actually not that much. One new aspect as proposed by the European Commission is charging points for electric vehicles for commercial buildings with a certain space and with parking lots. That is one aspect which is quite a lot under discussion, and there's quite a lot of how do you say, member states are opposing this aspect. But I will come back later on this today. There's also the proposal of having building automation and control system as an alternative for inspection. I think nowadays the technologies and smart control systems are there to support building managers in really finding out if there's failures in the system, if they need maintenance, and so on. So that is where the proposal from the European Commission tries to align with new technologies. At the same time, there is an explicit mentioning of long-term renovation strategies, not only for residential buildings, but also for commercial buildings, for national authorities to increase investment in renovation of those buildings. And last but not least, there is for the first time, there is the aspect of smart readiness, or the smart aspect in buildings being mentioned, and that is a Smartness Indicator. In my next slide, I go a little bit further on that Smartness Indicator aspect. So what is the Smartness Indicator? Right now, with the current legislation, all buildings are already obliged to have an energy performance certificate, which is pointing out how much energy they are consuming, or they should consume according to certain calculation framework. But at the same time, we don't know how smart a building is. It's not indicated anywhere. And therefore, the Commission said there's quite a lot of smart technologies happening, which are actually part of this energy efficiency evolution we're going through. So it could or should be additional to the current EPC. If we take a little bit closer look what could be in the Smartness Indicator, first of all, buildings, they adapt in response to the needs of the occupants. And I learned a very interesting thing from the CommONEnergy project is that if it's outside 30 degrees, visitors from a shopping center, they're very comfortable with a 26 degrees temperature, while actually quite often shopping center try to decrease temperature to 22 degrees. So it's a lot of waste of energy, while actually the public doesn't need to. So it's really this adaptation to the needs of the occupant. Second aspect of smart buildings is really to empower the users and occupants with control over the energy flow. So how much energy do you consume for which aspect? How much energy goes to lighting? How much goes to refrigeration? How much goes to heating? It's important to know all this. At the same time, it's also important to track how much electricity or other renewables that you produce. Then there is the aspect of building automation to really facilitate maintenance and operation of the building. You can have perfect warning signals if things are going wrong in the level of consumption. And then the last, it's to explore a little bit the context of a broader context than the individual building as such. It's really how does your building behave compared to the energy system as such. Shopping centers can charge energy when there's a lot of free or cheap renewable energy available, and they could also put it on the net on moments that there is not much energy available. So all these demand responsive or demand flexibility services could be included in the smartness indicator. So for now, this is an aspect coming up, and then if I actually want to focus on what is the most important and the main challenge, it's absolutely deep renovation. And Wilmer indicated very clear on the slide with the colorful balls that especially in Western Europe, but also South Europe, most of the shopping centers are actually already constructed. And at the same time, for new buildings, they have to follow the NZEP regulations, so they're following those regulations. So as we all know, that the renovation rate in Europe is really too slow, between 0.4 and 1.2%, depending on the country. But as mentioned in the presentation before, the annual renovation of rates of shopping centers is 4.4%. And in reality, that means that by 2030, around 60% of the shopping centers will be upgraded. It's important to mention that this is not, of course, a deep renovation, but this is at least a tipping point. This is an opportunity that can be used to include energy energy efficiency aspects. So that was as we say in the renovation, we miss a lot of that in the European proposal or in the current European legislation. So from this project, we have policy recommendations based on the 23 organizations involved and the real demonstration cases we had. And it's really the issue of having cost-competitive deep renovation of shopping centers as a driver for EU policies. But key to that success is to encourage stakeholders to become key players in a low-carbon economy. And so my next 4 slides, I focus a little bit on these recommendations, what we think should be involved. So the decision-making power at shopping centers are center owners and managers, but at the same time are anchor tenants. Anchor tenants are the shops or the tenants that occupy a large or very important space of one shopping center. So they have a lot to say as well. And so they are driven by the imperative to maximize profit and to enhance customers' experience. And that is key actually to align their business model with energy saving incentives. So what is there important is that very often leading asset owners, they don't know how much energy they could save or what are targets or benchmark levels. So they should be assisted in a technical way to point out what is possible. And at the same time, that includes that there should be definitely training programs for facility managers, how to handle your control system, how to handle tenants that are difficult to follow. For example, I spoke with a shopping center manager and he said, like, okay, my tenants, they just leave on the televisions at night and the screens because they are afraid of having failures in the morning. So how do you handle this as a facility manager? At the same time, when I spoke with shopping center managers, they said, okay, houses across Europe, they are very different on level of energy consumption and because of the climate, but shopping centers across Europe, they are very similar. Okay, the different space and kind of shops they have. But if we have a kind of a benchmark platform where we can compare, it really would point us out what kind of energy and how much energy we should or could consume. Second aspect of recommendation on policy level is to communicate clearly these benefits. there are a lot of interesting demonstration projects, and a link to this CommONenergy project. We had also a prize for most sustainable shopping center, and this is an example from the Centro Sarca in Milano, where before restyling they had a 100,000 annual energy bill, and after restyling it dropped down to 40,000 just for the lighting and such. So these very interesting showcases to show that it works. So it is about raising this awareness with public displays of the energy savings, and you could even think of having something like the energy performance certificate, which is for public buildings already obliged to have public available, for shopping centers to have it as well, since it is a public space. So setting up these awareness campaigns and knowledge sharing platforms is something we have done severely across our demo cases in the 3 countries, and you see there a poster on the top, the bottom right. The third recommendation on the policy level is to promote the technology packages, and most important there is that from national level it is really important to define NZEP or energy positive or even smart building codes or targets for commercial buildings. Like if you're going to renovate as a shopping center manager, that you know to what would be your benchmark, what should be your objective to be future-proof as a building. And therefore, in the national renovation strategies, it's crucial that you introduce this kind of energy performance requirements for these commercial buildings. And I think it's absolutely key that we have as a trigger point this 4.4% renovation rate, which can really serve and to include as a systemic approach to energy efficiency as part of the management planning. So it means that as a shopping center manager, you have a kind of a planning to renovate and to maintain. In this, on long term, you should include your energy efficiency plan as well. And as a last recommendation, it's really to support the energy transition. So shopping centers are not or will not be individual buildings as such, but are part of a larger system. And we do see that in a case in the project, we linked charging points coming directly from PV installation linked to battery systems. We can do so, the technologies are there. At the same time, shopping centers can actually enlarge the services that they provide, and they can really become active players in the energy market with demand response or demand flexible services that they provide to the energy distributors. So that was an overview of the policy-related aspects for shopping centers, and I invite you to go and take a closer look at the policy fact sheet available at the website from the project. So Marina, I give back the floor to you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Martin, for this overview of the European aspects, European legislation related to commercial buildings. We will now give the floor to Magdalena Rozanska, who studied both in Poland and Spain with architecture and town planning. She joined Acciona in Spain to work around active and passive systems integration into the construction sector. And in CommONenergy, she works on the definition of solutions for a systemic energy needs reduction of commercial buildings. Magdalena will dig more into the passive solutions developed